So let's go into Returnal. Jeff was in the news for that.
Mr. Returnal.
I saw you in the chat. I was like, yeah, let's get Jeff in here. We're gonna talk about Returnal.
We had a lot of fun today. Jeff, shout out to Jeff coming by the stream too. He came by earlier. Everyone was glad to have you there, man.
Yeah, it was fun to hang out for sure. Yeah, I'm just like kicking it with my kids. I'm like, I'll see what OJ's doing. Yeah, we'll hang out.
We were having fun.
Well, Returnal came out. We got the reviews, of course, released. And what's everyone think of Returnal so far? Because I've been playing it more than I thought I would at first. I'll say this because the game came out, and leading up to the game coming out, I slowly got more and more sold on the game. Because when they first showed it, I was like, I guess they showed the Housemarque logo, and I was like, well, I'll check it out if it's Housemarque. But the more we've gotten closer and closer, the more gameplay they've shown. Now I have the game, and I'm with MVG. I like the game more than I thought I would originally when I first saw it.
Same.
Like there was that legitimate thought in my mind of $70. Like, yeah, you know, I will get it because it's like I'd like to play something other than a PS4 game in my PS5, but I mean, might as well. So Ratchet and Clank is the next big one that everyone's kind of waiting for on their PS5 from Sony. So I picked it up. I'm playing it. It is a lot of fun, despite some obvious flaws to the game that actually could be fixed later on if Housemarque really gets after it. And they seem to be listening to people about things just as simple as like a checkpoint system or something that is temporary, so that you can turn the game off without putting your system in the rest mode because people are still terrified of it. But Jeff, what'd you think of the game? Because I saw that 60.
Yeah, that's 60. Yeah,
there's a lot of screen caps and stuff flying all over Twitter with a 60 and with Jeff Grubb's name, and it was an interesting conversation, I guess, for people on Twitter.
Yeah, it was. I like the game. It's a good game. I definitely started off higher on it than I finished up, and that was just because of the structure of the game, the way it works. But it's a Housemarque game. Turns out Housemarque makes good, fun action games. They really nailed the combat. It feels good to fire the weapons. I think I'm still a little iffy on the dodge. I think sometimes the dodge, you have to get really good at the dodge move. Is it an
iframe or is it like perfect? Like, is it actually?
It is very iframe, and it's very actually generous on that actually. So like almost no matter what, there are certain attacks that you can't like phase through, but most of the time you can, and that feels good. But you have to be very aware of your surroundings, and a lot of time you're looking at enemies that are flying around, and that means you might be dodging, and you might dodge into something else behind you, or dodge off a cliff, and really that's going to take time to get used to. And really, a lot of times, if you don't know where you're going and you still need to dodge to get those iframes, you should just learn to like really master feathering it and just barely touching it, and you'll just sort of move out of the way and move through the bullets. And that's actually, it's a cool skill to learn. All that stuff really works for me. The problem is not the challenge. The challenge is not the problem. It's very good that this game is hard, because if it wasn't hard, there wouldn't be a lot to do. You would just blast through it. You want to get better at the game. The problem is that it doesn't give you a lot of other incentives other than wanting to get through the game. So when you start getting to later levels, and as they get more challenging, you're just facing against this monumental task of getting to the end, and you're not worried about like unlocking weapons like you did in Hades or Dead Cells. You're not worried about like there's just not a lot to offer on like breaking down big tasks into smaller tasks, and like, okay, listen, that run sucked. I did really bad. I got like a really bad roll. There was like a lot of crap stuff. And now, but at least I like worked towards this other goal. There's not a lot of that stuff. And then when those runs do go a long time, and they can be very long, especially when you kind of learn that, okay, you do need to like max out your build to have a chance on these later levels. You can get, a couple hours into a run, and then when it goes bad, all you're going to remember is that it went bad. You're not going to remember like anything special about your build, because everything kind of feels the same. You're always shooting weapons. You're always, dodging. You're always attacking with the melee, and that stuff is good. But at a certain point, those runs start to blur together in your head, because it's just there's just not a lot of variety to it. And that's stuff that other roguelites have done very well. And I really agree with the sentiment that I think Housemarque is going to hear some of this stuff, because now I'm not the only one saying it. And really, there was a lot of reviews that echoed this as well. But I think that if they take some time and update this game and add in some other stuff, other incentives to sort of break up the combat and that flow, they're going to turn what is a good game that I like into a fantastic game, a great game. And I really hope they get there.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most surprising part about it, though, is Housemarque just taking advantage of everything the PS5 had to offer, whether it was like the load times is very quick, which it needs to be, because like immediately if you die, it just flashes you back to her crashing into the planet and getting out right away. Like it's seriously like a second to get back into the game.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, so that they understand that it's like we're not going to show you like a black screen for like 10 seconds or something with like here's a helpful hint or something. But like the big thing in this game has to be that DualSense controller right now, because that DualSense controller with all the stuff they're doing is super impressive right now. Like
you can feel everything with it.
Yeah, and I you know what, the halfway press on L2 works better than I thought it would when they first really started talking about it. I'm like, oh, in a game like this where you know it's a lot of very specific bits of timing and stuff, and it's like I press it halfway and then all the way for the alt fire. It works well. Like it actually feels like you're pressing it and pressing into something for just the initial zoom, and then you actually crush it for like the alt fire.
Yeah, it feels like a GameCube controller, and it works, and it's something I got used to. It's still it stinks whenever you accidentally like really pull the trigger down you didn't mean to. That could still happen. I did end up switching that, but it's got completely customizable controls. So if you don't like something, just change it, and really no complaint there. I will say that I did listen to a podcast yesterday that Dreamcast guy was on. I know he's not here tonight, but he said he had to turn off the haptics because it was too much, and it was causing his hands to go numb.
Yeah,
so it was like the rain was like rumbling in his hands, and I'm like, I got that to a certain extent. I was feeling the same way after like long runs and using certain weapons that really make those haptics go crazy. But I'm like also at a point still where I don't want to turn that stuff off ever, because it's like, man, I bought this PlayStation 5 with my own money. I want to like get the most out of it. So I just kept going with it. But I definitely agree with that sentiment to a certain extent.
There were some surprising parts too that I noticed with it, like where it's using the speaker on the DualSense while you're doing other things all at once. But there was this one gun I had, I think it has it's almost like a laser that comes out of it for the alt fire. And I don't think the sound was coming from the speaker necessarily. I think it was coming from the haptic feedback. Like, the rumble motors actually put out like a certain a certain frequency. I think that's where the sound was coming from. I was like, oh, that's so weird, because it makes like that synth kind of noise. I think it was coming from the speaker. Yeah, I think it was coming from the rumble motors, like how like we've had the Joy-Cons on the Switch make sound, and that's where it's coming
Labo.
from.
Yeah, Labo does that. Yeah, weird.
I was like, that's interesting. So Housemarque did a lot with the DualSense controller, with the 3D audio. If you have good headphones and you turn it on for this, whether it's those Pulse headphones or just really any that you could use with it that are halfway decent, it is really good. Like, it's super noticeable. You can hear things behind you that are happening, and it actually gives you an advantage in the game as opposed to not having that. So like I am really impressed with Housemarque trying to do everything they can to make it feel like a PS5 game after having, like I said, so many PS4 games we've been playing through backwards compatibility that just have better frame rates and resolution and all of this. So I feel like, I know people were talking about, is Returnal, should it be a $70 game? I mean, technically it's probably the most PS5 game we've had. I'll say that, like the most like a PS5 game out of everything, really.
And people are really going to fall in love with it too, I think. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that are very vocal supporters of it, because it's just going to be a kind of game that you can play for forever and get a lot out of. So yeah,
I love the game. I think it's great, and I think it
MVG was originally down on this too, by the way. I want to point that out. When we first going into it, you're like, I don't know, should I get
I was
this?
down, but I did pick it up because there was really nothing else to play on my PS5, and I was on like firmware 1, so I thought I'd dust it off and update everything.
People thought I was kidding about that when I said time to plug into the PS5.
I was
serious.
I wasn't kidding, but I really like the game. I think it actually is better than I thought it would be, but I will say that I don't think it's worth $70.
Okay.
I don't think it's worth $70.
I think that's going to be, I think some people will see it that way because of the type of game that it is. I understand that. So there are people who said that Demon Souls wasn't worth $70. And I can understand that because they're just like, I don't get it. It's the same kind of game I played on the PS3. It just looks better and runs better.
I think my question is, what game is going to be worth $70 then?
Ratchet
and Clank looks worth $70.
Yeah, Rift Apart is worth $70. That is a unanimous decision by this panel.
I mean, that they've shown that or Horizon, I guess, right now. God of War is a logo. It and Metroid Prime are hanging out.
Do you basically mean games are going to have like pre-existing series titles behind it?
I like where Miss Click is going with this, because how do we know if a game's 70 or not?
Well, it's subjective at the end of the day. This is extremely subjective based on whatever. Some people say something's not worth 70. That doesn't mean it's like there's not any universal unilateral type of it's worth this. And I think gamers do that way too much with games. It's based on what you think. You know, if you think it's worth 70, then it's worth 70. If you don't think it's worth 70, then it's not worth 70. And that's that at the end of the day.
Is Sony going to drop the price of Returnal anytime soon, though, do you think?
Interesting, Jeff, you bring this up because when I was looking around for this game, which by the way, super hard to find this game physically. So I would look around for this, to be honest, because I don't know if they're going to really push a lot of these out to stores over the next year. It's just putting it out there. But the thing I've noticed, if you go to Walmart, Jeff, I don't know if you've looked around at Walmart's games like in stores or anything, they mark their games down. And it seems like something Walmart does to just try to bring you in. But the one game that they do not mark down are anything from Sony when it comes to the PS5. Even if it's MLB The Show 21, it's marked down on the Xbox, but not on the PS5. It's really weird. I think that's Sony flexing some muscle, probably saying, hey, we know you want to get PS5s in there. Here's the deal. You cannot lower the price of it. Like, it takes a lot of muscle to do that, but Sony has the muscle right now. And if that's important to them, I think that indicates these price drops are just not going to come. Demon's Souls is still 70. Sackboy is still $50 or $60 or whatever. All these games are 60. still full price. I don't think Sony is looking to. I think they're looking to do what Nintendo does this gen. Like, I think they're just like, you know what? The hype is there for the PS5. The games are full price, and they're just going to stay that way. Like Ghost of Tsushima is still 60, isn't it? Like MSRP.
You can find it. You can find it.
I've seen it at 40.
I think it's never had a discount on PSN. I think for sure. I looked at that for a story the other day, but I don't know about retail.
Jeff, did you beat the game?
Yeah, I did.
So you mentioned before, you know, the motivation, the incentive to continue playing the game. What about the story? Because like that is one part of the game that I'm really intrigued about. Like I love. I don't want to say anything about the game.
Dude, there was one audio log that tripped me up. Actually,
I love the audio logs. I love the premise behind the game. I love the house that you just kind of stumble. I mean, I love all that stuff. So, can you talk about where the story goes, or was it? I don't want you to spoil it, but can you tell me? You know, was it kind of rewarding at the end, or did it? You know, was it kind of forgetful? What was your take on the storyline?
I was intrigued by that stuff at first as well, and I think what happens is the story starts getting spaced out further and further as you go, to the point where you start to lose the thread, or it's not really what you're motivated by anymore. There's long stretches where you won't find audio logs because you're like you are spending hours in the same place that you spent before, and so I was personally like losing that steam. I feel like I found out a little bit more about the house, a little bit more about everything, but by that point, it was not quite as sad. I feel like it was a good setup, and then the delivery wasn't quite as good. I think other people might disagree with that, but that's kind of where I landed on it. But no, there were still some audio logs that like really like John mentioned the one here in our chat here where that one's messed up. There's a couple others that like suggest some like a really messed up metaphysical stuff, and all of that stuff just adds a ton of flavor to what you're doing. And like a couple of them gave me chills. Like I'm like, oh man, that's just like one of those weird sci-fi ideas. When you start thinking about them, it's cool and just like adds more to what you're doing. But overall, the story it's definitely not like a huge motivating factor when you compare it to something like Hades, where it was like that was why you were playing a lot of times.
Yeah. So go ahead, Jordan.
For me, like I think my favorite thing about it so far, taken away, like I like the gameplay a lot, but it is that world and the world building. Like immediately when you start the game, if you don't feel like you're in some world out of the Alien movies, then it literally has so much symbolism. It uses similar terminology. Some of the stuff you stumble upon, and I'm a huge Alien fan. I mean, I have a whole xenomorph on my arm. Like this is like the perfect world, and I like exploring. Even if I'm dying, even if I'm not progressing super far, the stuff that I'm finding in the game and the areas that I'm exploring, I think have been the coolest part with it, as well as the audio logs and building whatever this story is. I'm, for the little time I've actually spent with it so far, the last day and some, I'm really enjoying it. I wouldn't say definitely yet, but
there's definitely a Prometheus vibe with this game, right?
Oh yeah.
Did you get to the part where she picks up the like one of the parasites and she did the exact thing that the guy in Prometheus does, where he's like, it looks harmless, so I'm gonna pick it up, and like, of course, it jumps on her and starts sucking her blood.
All the parallels from the Prometheus film are in this, from the statues to an old civilization to eggs and the goop and then the parasite. There's so much in this that if you're an Alien fan, this almost feels like it's right out of something that H.R. Geiger, the artist and designer of all that, created, and I love it.